Welcome to Art Book Nook. My name is Kay and I share and review my collection of art and craft books. Today I'll share Making Colour Sing by Jeanne Dobie. This book is a watercolour classic which has inspired artists for decades. It's beautifully written and illustrated, and it helps watercolorists unlock the secrets of luminosity, colour, value and design, and will show you how to make your paintings glow, from colour harmony and contrast to lost edges and unexpected colour choices. So grab yourself a drink, settle down and let's take a look inside together. Jeanne Dobie believes you can turn even the most ordinary subject into an extraordinary and stunning painting, even something as commonplace as the lowly kitchen sink. She promises her book will stimulate fresh ways of approaching painting and describes her lessons as mind-bending. Wow! Well, I'm really excited to explore further. There are 31 chapters in Jeanne Dobie's Making Colour Sing book, and we begin with Chapter 1, the Pure Pigment Palette. Jeanne explains that pure pigments open the door to unlimited colour possibilities, and that getting to know pigments, their strengths and personality, is essential for any watercolourist. On the facing page, she shares her own palette of pure pigments, which include transparent, semi-opaque and staining transparents. I've linked to Jeanne's website in the description below, where she lists her palette in both Winsor & Newton and Daniel Smith paint colours. I've actually printed this out and included it in my copy of Jeanne's book as a handy reference. If you're interested in capturing the effects of light, Jeanne explains that the illusion is best achieved with transparent watercolour pigments. These allow the greatest amount of light to pass through to the paper and reflect back to the viewer, creating a beautiful luminosity. Transparent pigments also stay transparent when they are mixed together, so you won't end up with muddy colours. By contrast, starting out with opaque pigments can quickly dull your work and make mud on the palette far more likely. Jeanne herself uses opaque pigments only occasionally, and when she does, she prefers to mix them with a translucent colour. I've linked in the description below to an excellent video where Jeanne explains and demonstrates this in more detail. It's well worth a watch. I love the title of Chapter 2, Mouse Power. It's all about achieving luminous greys, which is an underrated colour. Jeanne describes strong colours as jewels, ones that should be placed carefully so they can truly shine and glow. The quiet mouse colours, as she calls them, act like the setting for those jewels, or the bit players who support the star of the show. On the right hand page, Jeanne illustrates a simple way to remember complementary colours. Take one primary, say yellow, and then mix the other two primaries, red and blue, together to create purple. That purple is the complementary colour to yellow, and it works the same way with all the other primary colours. I'll be honest, I've never even thought about it this way before. I've always just memorised them. Jeanne explains that when you mix a primary colour with its complement, you create grey, and the range is virtually unlimited. So there's really no need to buy pre-mixed greys in tubes. A good repertoire of greys is essential in landscape painting, and she includes a simple experiment so you can compare lifeless greys with luminous ones for yourself. And Jeanne invites you to look at the row of squares along the bottom of this 2-page spread, but to look at it from across the room. You'll notice that the centres seem to vibrate. This is a subtle optical effect that shows just how lively a well-mixed grey can be. Jeanne's painting, Curly's Barn, is a wonderful example of this idea, as it's painted entirely in greys. On the facing page, she shares all of the colour mixing recipes she's used, and then invites you to experiment for yourself in the book's second project, which Jeanne has called Mouse Power. Chapter 3 is titled Octanic Colour, Mixing Powerful Colour. Jeanne uses the word octanic to describe colour at its most impactful and vibrant. But how do you choose the right pigments to create, for example, the brightest possible green? This is where knowing your primaries becomes so important. Jeanne stresses the value of practising the colour mixing exercise in this chapter over and over again until you really understand the potential of your pigments. On the right hand page, She shows examples of octanic colour mixes alongside duller ones, and on the right she's painted the same subject using those different mixes, so you can clearly compare the results and see the effect for yourself. Chapter 4 is called Greens, Greens and More Greens. Jeanne reminds us that there are countless variations of the colour green, from cool grey greens to warm yellow greens, and that the human eye is actually the most sensitive to this colour. Greens can be one of the trickiest colours to mix, but don't despair. Jeanne includes a recipe sheet of different greens to guide you. Her painting, Erin Patchwork Quilt, is painted almost entirely in shades of green, showing you just how versatile the colour can be. She encourages you to develop your own repertoire of distinctive greens through experimentation, and then to choose a scene rich in greenery for your own landscape study. In order to help you, on the right-hand page, Jeanne has provided all the colour recipes of all the greens she's used in her painting called Erin Drumhills, The Many Colours of Green. Chapter 5 is Push-Pull with Warm and Cool, Creating Distance and Atmosphere. Jeanne explains that master artists don't just see a colour as red, yellow or blue. Instead, they recognise it as a warm blue or a cool red or a muted or intense yellow. Shifting a colour towards the cool side makes it recede, while warming its neighbour brings it forward. She cautions us not to be fooled by our own assumptions about an object's local colour, because light conditions constantly change what we see. Snow, for example, can appear pink during a winter sunset, as Jeanne shows beautifully in her painting December Dusk. Look at the stripes of colour on the right-hand page. Notice how some colours appear to jump forward. Jeanne includes some more colour recipes here, showing how mixing pure pigments can give you cool and warm versions of the same hue, as well as subtle grey variations. A reminder of how much range and flexibility you can achieve when you really get to know your pigments. Painting under different light conditions will push you away from the mundane. A dark dramatic sky, for example, is far more engaging than a flat bright blue one. Jeanne encourages you to always look for that special atmosphere, and she adds an intriguing reminder that the colour white doesn't follow the same rules as other pigments. In skies, it's the cool white clouds that come forward, while the warmer whites recede into the background. Who'd have thought? I really love Jeanne's painting called Midnight Sun. I love the colours. I just think it's beautiful. Chapter 6 is Push, Pull and Turn, making the form appear three-dimensional. With an understanding of push, pull and colour temperature, you can give any form a sense of volume using colour alone. Jeanne illustrates how the interplay between warm and cool tones creates the illusion of a figure turning in space, adding depth and dimension without relying on heavy layering. In these pages, Jeanne explains how to give objects in the landscape a real sense of form. In her painting of a boat, for example, notice the subtle transitions in colour that make the interior appear hollow. And in the cottage, the reflections in the windows create the illusion of depth inside the building. Small shifts in colour and value can completely transform a flat surface into something that feels three-dimensional. Chapter 7 is Dark Glows, Getting the Most from Darks. According to Jeanne, darks can be luminous, bright and powerful if you mix them with pure pigments rather than relying on ivory black or Payne's grey. The role of a dark colour, she explains, is to complement the light and help it emit a glow. Her painting, Hill Climb Farm, is a perfect example, because although it's a dark painting overall, it's still full of rich colour. Across these two pages, Jeanne shares more of her colour recipes. She illustrates how to animate lights with darks, how to create velvety blacks, and how to mix clean, clear browns, all by working with pure pigments rather than pre-mixed tubes. Browns made with pure pigments, Jeanne explains, are transparent and full of life. You start with an orange mixture, then add Viridian to create a range of warm browns, or Windsor Green for cooler ones. She illustrates just a few of the many possibilities and then encourages you to try painting of your own using only browns, just as she has in her own piece, Brandywine Valley, shown on the facing page. Chapter 8 is Singing Colour, Making Colour Pulsate. Jeanne reminds us not to confuse colour intensity with glowing colour. Yellow in particular can be deceptive because we imagine this to be bright and glowing. She demonstrates this with two strips of yellow, where the one on the right, although more intense, is actually less luminous than the one on the left. To truly make a colour sing, it needs to interact with the colours surrounding it. On the right-hand page, she compares different colour reactions to show how placement and contrast can bring out a colour's vibrancy. Jeanne invites us to compare two versions of the Dalmatian lace maker, showing how subtle shifts in colour handling can completely change the result. She also includes a handy fault-finding section here, perfect for troubleshooting if things don't quite go according to plan in your own work. Chapter 9 is White Glows, Refining White Colour. Jeanne suggests we think of whites not as blank spaces but as colours in their own right. Like pearls, they should contain subtle, delicate shades. To make her whites glow, she uses very dilute washes of pure pigment, treating those washes almost like a blush. On the right-hand page, there's a recipe chart showing just a sample of the many shades of white you can create. Jeanne encourages you to make a chart of your own, always remembering to use pure pigments heavily diluted with water. Once you've mastered creating white glows, Jeanne challenges you to take it a step further. Instead of relying on pigment for your light, leave areas of pure white paper untouched, and then use the surrounding halftone of colour to optically shift the appearance of that white. It's a subtle but powerful way to make the paper itself become part of the painting's luminosity, and this is illustrated in Jeanne's paintings of the white flower. Inspired by a very ordinary photograph, Jeanne created the stunning painting Victorian Ladies. Look closely at the white porch. It's simply the pure white of the paper, yet it seems to glow and radiate warm sunlight. That effect comes from the cool violet and green colours placed right next to it. This technique is called keying. Jeanne explains that keying your whites can make the difference between a watercolour with an ordinary light-dark contrast and one with a truly glowing light-dark contrast, and this is beautifully illustrated. I really love this painting of Jeanne's. I think it's very special. Chapter 10 is the art of not mixing but layering with glazes. Up to this point, the lessons have focused on physically mixing one colour with another, but colours can also be mixed optically. Watercolour's transparency allows you to layer one colour over another, creating effects that feel almost magical. The key is to let each layer dry completely before applying the next. This process is called glazing, and it imparts a luminosity that can't be achieved by any other means. To the viewer, it looks as though they're looking through layers of glass. Jeanne will guide you through a detailed step-by-step project called Your First Glaze, giving you the opportunity to try this technique for yourself. Jeanne also offers extra hints for success. You can adjust a glaze to accent any colour you choose, but always work with the three primaries. And don't make every layer equal. If you do, you'll just end up with a dull neutral. Whilst glazing is certainly time-consuming, the careful execution is worth it for the luminous results. She closes this chapter with a challenge for you. Mix your three primaries together in a single wash. Then compare that to the same colours, layered separately as a glaze. You'll immediately notice the difference. Chapter 11 is Atmospheric Glazes, working with graduated glazes. Once you're comfortable with flat glazes, you may wish to vary them so they're stronger in some areas of the painting and lighter in others. These graduated glazes allow you to capture subtle lighting effects and create the illusion of space. Can you believe we're only a third of the way through this incredible book? Glazing is best suited for capturing delicate atmospheric nuances, making whites truly glow and creating optical colour vibrations that are not possible in ordinary mixed washes. But the greatest benefit is clean, clear mixtures. When the colours are applied separately, it's impossible for them to contaminate one another. Chapter 12, A Multi-Layered Vision. We may all be familiar with planning the design of a painting, but Jeanne reminds us that planning your glazes is just as important, especially if you want to preserve areas of untouched white paper. In her painting Erin Drumhill's, she begins by painting the cottage in its local colour. Then, once it was dry, she added a light glazed shadow. This allowed the underpainting to shine through, creating a depth and glow you simply can't achieve by any other method. Here is an illustrated example of how Jeanne applied selective glazing to her painting Puddle Duck Farm. Many artists find yellow one of the most difficult colours to deepen, but Jeanne shows you how easily it can be done with glazing. On the left-hand page, you can compare two versions of the same subject. In the second painting, the yellow building has been glazed with its complementary colour purple, resulting in a richer, deeper yellow without changing the actual colour itself. Chapter 13 is all about turning errors into assets, correcting paintings with glazes. It's an excellent technique for collecting colour errors in particular, and here Jeanne describes how to tame colours in your painting which may be too bright and unnatural looking. Here Jeanne provides clear examples of how to subdue overly bright colours, and also how to revive darks that may have gone flat. Chapter 14 is Ordinary into Extraordinary, transforming a painting with glazes. In the previous lesson, glazing was used to turn specific colour errors into assets. Here Jeanne broadens the focus, showing how a glaze can transform an entire painting, or even just provide a tiny accent. In her painting Helsinki Morning Market, there was initially too much colour excitement, which fragmented the composition. By applying a unifying glaze underneath the awning, she brought all those lively colours together while still keeping them vibrant. Jeanne also shares a before and after of her painting of a Cornish sea village, which at first looked flat and ordinary. The lower portion of the scene lay in shadow, so she applied a transparent blue glaze across that area. That single glaze dramatically transformed the entire painting, so much so that Jeanne admits she could hardly believe the result herself. Chapter 15 is Colour Bridges, creating transitions between colours. A colour transition is often a subtle refinement, something the viewer may not consciously notice, but one that makes all the difference. In her painting Alpine Meadow, Jeanne shows how the grey mountains at first seem cut off from the lush green of the meadows below. By floating just a touch of green up into the mountains, she created a colour bridge that softened the harsh juxtaposition which tied the scene together. Here Jeanne offers a few more examples. In Summer Fields, top left, she softened the abrupt value change between the meadow and the trees by floating some of the red from the field up into the foliage. In the top right example, she's carried a touch of purple from the cliffs down into the sand, creating another subtle link. And if you'd like to discover exactly where the colour bridges are in the painting shown bottom right, well, I should encourage you to pick up a copy of Jeanne's invaluable book for yourself. Chapter 16 is Colour Camouflauge, making a colour appear to be what it's not. This is the art of creating colour illusions. Jeanne then poses the question, have you ever had a lesson in making a colour disappear? She explains that it's easier than you might think, and that by learning how colours affect each other, you can soon master these subtle sleights of hand. On the right-hand page, Jeanne illustrates this magical technique with two versions of the same scene, each using a different background colour. In the first, a bluish background reinforces the worn stone of the barn, making it stand out. In the second image, the background trees are shifted to a warm brown, and now the barn walls almost disappear while the cool lavender roof is emphasised. It's a striking demonstration of how colours placed side by side influence one another, for better or for worse, and how understanding this can help you make the best choices in your own work. Chapter 17 is about paint passages. Jeanne asks us to think about weaving a passage of colour throughout a painting to create a subtle sense of unity. The colour doesn't have to be exactly the same tone throughout. In fact, if you study the 3 examples she's included here, you'll notice how different shades of purple have been carried throughout the entire paintings. On the left, Jeanne points to Winter Evening, Rio Grande Valley by Fremont Ellis, where blue has been chosen as the unifying colour. And on the right, in her own painting, Quicksilver Mood, she weaves 2 colours, purple and green, throughout the composition. It's a lovely reminder of how powerful this technique can be. What colour do you think you would choose? I'd love to hear, so let me know in the comments below. Chapter 18, Colour Vibrations, is all about using colour to create visual tension. In the example top right, your eyes find it hard to settle because the blue and yellow are in equal proportions. You can't help but dart back and forth between the 2 patches of colour. Jeanne also shows how complements can be used to create optical effects. In the 2 paintings of the fence, bottom right page, the same fence colour has been used, but the backgrounds change everything. Against the green field, the fence takes on a rosy cast, since red is green's complement. Against the yellow field, it shifts towards lavender, the opposite of yellow. And notice too how the eyes in the portrait of the young girl stand out so strongly. Painted in cool blue, that contrasts directly with the warm orange of her skin. Here Jeanne illustrates how to set up and then nullify a colour vibration, showing you how to control the effect rather than let it overwhelm a painting. She also goes on to demonstrate how you can create striking colour reactions even with non-complementary colours, expanding the range of possibilities beyond the obvious pairings. Chapter 19 is Colour as Abstract Pattern, and this is an exercise in designing a painting built entirely around vibrating colour. Jeanne walks us through the steps she took to create her painting called Cabbage Fields, illustrating the careful planning process she went through to transform pure colour into a bold abstract design. Chapter 20 is Colour Composition, Planning the Colour Design. Jeanne reminds us that colour is a powerful tool, yet often overlooked when creating a composition. The goal is to plan your colours so that every part of the painting works together. She illustrates this point with a simple analogy. Imagine placing a single diamond on black velvet. Your eyes would go straight to it. But if you covered the velvet with lots more diamonds, would you even be able to find the original? Colour, she explains, works the same way in painting. It can either focus our attention or scatter it. Jeanne provides a few more examples to illustrate her point. Notice how the red berries almost disappear when the surrounding leaves are painted in warm browns, but instantly pop when those same leaves are painted in green, their complementary colour. In the painting top right, the colours are kept subdued, so they echo one another rather than compete with the main focus. And bottom right, the reds are rendered in different shades. If they were all identical, that repetition would quickly become dull and boring. Chapter 21 is called 12 Shapes. Jeanne designed this lesson to help you think in terms of shapes rather than just drawn lines when creating a composition. At the top right, she shows a simple line drawing, and at the bottom of the page you can see the finished painting. In the middle, she illustrates all the shapes within the composition cut out like a jigsaw puzzle, making it clear how those interlocking forms build the structure of the painting. The benefit of designing with shapes is that you can move the pieces around, put them together, then take them apart again and try a different arrangement before you commit to the actual painting. Jeanne encourages you to experiment with this method and offers some practical tips, such as be mindful of pointed shapes as they draw the eye, remember that shadows are shapes too, and don't forget that backgrounds count as shapes as well. She references Matisse, who famously cut shapes from coloured paper with scissors to create some of his best work. Chapter 22, Shapes plus Value plus Colour. Once you've designed your composition with shapes, it's time to bring in value and colour. Jeanne reminds us that composition is the sum of many parts, how shapes, value patterns and colour choices work together. This all might sound a bit complicated, but she takes you through the process step by step, building a clear value plan first and then layering colour to reinforce the design and lead the eye around the painting. This technique also lends itself very well to abstract painting, as illustrated here, Cars in Sleet Storm by Arthur Dove. Chapter 23 is Unpainted Shapes using the white paper. At this stage, Jeanne asks you to pause and really consider the importance of the untouched paper itself. In the painting shown here, you can see how unpainted areas of white play an essential role in supporting the composition. At the bottom of the page, she gives a simple optical test. 2 squares, each containing a circle. Which circle looks larger to you? They are in fact the same size, but the white circle appears to expand, and your eye naturally favours it over the dark one. Jeanne suggests you keep this in mind whenever you're tempted to cover the entire surface of the paper with paint. If you look closely at the painting of the bottles on the left, do you notice something unusual? The bottles themselves have actually been left unpainted. Only the contents inside them and the spaces between them have actually been painted. On the right-hand page, Jeanne provides a simple exercise for you to try. It's designed to help you decide which shapes within your own composition are best left unpainted, so the white of the paper can play its part in the overall design. Using the white of the paper as part of the composition led artist Jeanne Keck to create Orchard Memory, an exciting semi-abstract interpretation of a realistic subject. Chapter 24 is Beyond the Subject, Looking for a Relationship. What is it that captures your eye when you're searching for a subject to paint? Jeanne explains that the key is to simplify a complicated scene. In the painting Neva with Green Cup, your eye is immediately drawn to the figure because everything around her has been left uncluttered. A scene that's overloaded with objects can be very difficult to organise into an effective painting. Consider the 2 sketches on these pages. Which do you think will work best as a painting? Jeanne suggests that whenever you feel disappointed with a conventional scene, try relocating your main subject of interest. Make use of artistic licence. By doing so, you'll be forced to give more thought to the so-called mundane areas of your painting, often transforming them into something far more engaging. Chapter 25 is Distinctive Divisions, Making Dynamic Shapes. Jeanne notes that when jurying competitions, judges will often remark on how much they value distinctive divisions of shape, because dynamic shapes are what make a painting stand out. She advises you not to discard a painting just because it hasn't turned out as you hoped. Sometimes all it might need are a few dynamic shapes adding in. To help you explore this, she's included an experimental exercise using cut paper of the same hue but in different values, so you can play with divisions and discover their impact. It's very easy to fall into the trap of creating monotonous, repetitive shapes, so Jeanne encourages you to watch out for that. Compare the 2 mountain paintings shown here. The one at the bottom is far more engaging to look at. In the painting on the right, the large dark shapes of the towering cliffs hold your interest because they're so different. And notice too how the seals in the lower half vary in size, adding balance and variety. Chapter 26 is Right on the Mark Values. Here Jeanne illustrates and explains how to build a solid value structure as the foundation for your painting. She points out the most common pitfalls artists face and shows examples of those mistakes so you can learn to avoid them. To guide you, she also provides 3 clear and basic steps to help you plan your values with confidence. Chapter 27 is a subtle touch handling a mass of midtones. If you've ever struggled with values, Jeanne offers some very practical advice. Begin by planning your lightest lights, then establish where your darkest darks are going to go. This approach leaves you free to decide where your mid-values should fall. Learning how to handle midtones is essential. Without it, you may find yourself painting only subjects in strong shadow. Some of the most beautiful paintings, Jeanne reminds us, are created with mid-tone values. Jeanne asks, are you ready for a mind bender? What follows, she warns, is one of the most challenging projects in this book. The task is to paint a scene without using any light values or dark values at all. You're only permitted to work with colours in the mid-value range. To guide you, she includes an example painting showing just how effective this unusual approach can be. Chapter 28 is the impact of white. Back in Chapter 23, you saw how quickly an unpainted area of white can attract the eye. Remember the black and white circles, where the white appeared more powerful than the black? In this exercise, Jeanne asks you to create a composition by first planning your light value shapes, then adding darker value shapes to support them. Chapter 29, The Dark Partner. A dark pattern can turn an ordinary scene into pure drama. To design a predominantly dark painting, you must carefully plan the focus of the white. Look at the exquisite painting on the left and notice how the limited lights hold the composition together. Remember that darks aren't the same as shadows. Darks are a design choice, whereas shadows are a lighting effect. Keep them distinct and the drama in your paintings will stay clear and powerful. Darks mixed from pure pigments are powerful, highly saturated and transparent. What more could you ask for? On this page, Jeanne shares a few of her secrets for applying dark paint in ways that increase the octanic effect and that will give you the maximum vibrancy. Chapter 30, A Personalised Light. When learning how to paint light, Jeanne strongly recommends a simple but very effective and important exercise. Go out early in the morning and paint a scene that interests you. Then return at midday and paint the same scene again. Then return later in the day and paint the same scene once more. By practicing this often, you'll train yourself to be able to capture any subject in any lighting condition. On the left-hand page, Jeanne illustrates the effect using just two colours, yellow and blue, showing how dramatically light alone can transform a scene. Chapter 31 is Pattern as a Subject. For our ancestors, interpreting patterns in the environment was vital for survival, and even today our brains are hardwired to search for them. As an artist, you can use this to your advantage. On the right-hand page, Jeanne shows us two paintings that at first glance seem completely different in both subject and colour. But look more closely. What do you notice? Well, they actually share the same underlying pattern. Jeanne's painting, Three Bretons, illustrates this point. You can't help but find your eyes are drawn to the lady's feet, because without even realising it, we're always searching for a pattern. Jeanne concludes Making Colours Sing with some powerful advice. Don't aspire to become a technician, aspire to be an artist. She explains that she looks for artists, not just well-executed paintings. Your art should be like your handwriting, instantly recognisable. And just as no two people are alike, no two artists should paint alike. She encourages you not to simply paint the scene before you, but to paint the reflection of that scene in your mind's eye. Her words remind me of an experience I had a year ago on an art retreat with a very well-known American watercolorist. At the end of the week, one of the other participants had produced some truly amazing paintings. When I complimented them, I expected them to feel proud and grateful for such valuable guidance from the tutor, but instead they sighed and said, "Yes, but I still can't paint like Andy." I remember thinking how sad that was, to end such an inspiring week, not by celebrating their own voice, but by comparing themselves to the tutor. And I think Jeanne's message is exactly that. The goal isn't to paint like someone else, it's to find your own vision and your own handwriting as an artist. How often do you look at a painting and have a really good idea who the artist might be who's painted it? So what do I think about Jeanne Dobie's book? Well, I think of Making Colour Sing as a book in two parts really. The first focuses on colour, while the second leans more toward composition. Both sections are extremely valuable and full of insight. Beginners may find some of the concepts in the second half a little challenging, but the chapters on colour at the start will be especially helpful for learning how to mix and use pigments effectively. I learnt a lot from it, and I've been dabbling with watercolour for several years now. This isn't a step-by-step follow-along book with, follow me projects. It's for artists who truly want to learn how to handle watercolour and how to design paintings that rise above the ordinary. I strongly recommend it to any aspiring artist. I think it's a wonderful book and a valuable investment. I've put links in the description below to where you can buy your own copy, and I've also linked to Jeanne's website. And she doesn't have a social media presence. There's just one video that I found on YouTube, which I strongly suggest you watch because she explains the optical colour mixing really well. But apart from that, there's nothing on social media. If you're really interested in colour, I've linked to a few more book reviews by me that focus on colour in watercolour. I'm sure you'll find them interesting. If you've enjoyed this review of Making Colour Sing, I'd love for you to join me here at Art Book Nook. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you'll be notified when I share my next review. And if you've read this book or if you've tried out any of Jeanne Dobie's exercises, please let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I hope you found this review helpful. If you did, please give the video a like. It really helps YouTube share it with others who enjoy art books too. I post a new art book review every week, so if you'd like to see more, do consider subscribing. I truly appreciate it. If you found the review helpful, please feel free to leave a comment below. I reply to every one. And if there's an art book you'd like me to feature, just let me know. I'll do my best to review it for you. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy painting.